In an age of empires and unshakable faith, one man chose a totally different weapon, the pen. He was a scholar who stood right at the crossroads of the medieval and modern worlds, a guy whose ideas would literally shake the foundations of Europe. This is the story of Desiderius Erasmus. See, Erasmus wasn't a king or a conqueror. He was an intellectual powerhouse. His currency was ideas, and he used this brilliant, sharp satire and deep scholarship not just to comment on his time, but to actively try and reshape it. He looked around and saw a world that desperately needed to change, and he was going to be its most eloquent and, often its most cutting critic. So, who exactly was this man? Well, to really get to the heart of Erasmus, you have to understand the revolutionary intellectual movement he championed. And he wasn't just some participant. He was its leading voice, what people called the Prince of Humanists. Humanism was nothing short of a revolution of the mind. It was this massive shift away from the rigid, kind of abstract thinking of the Middle Ages and toward a celebration of human reason, our potential, our dignity. The whole goal was to go back to the original sources, the great works of ancient Greece and Rome, the early Christian scriptures, to really foster wisdom, virtue, and personal integrity. This was the intellectual soil where all of Erasmus's work would grow. And this is the man right at the center of it all. Born in Holland, Erasmus had to navigate this era of incredible religious and social upheaval, and he rose to become maybe the most famous scholar in all of Europe, his name becoming basically synonymous with learning and a sharp, critical eye that, believe me, spared no one. And if Erasmus had a weapon of choice for all this critical work, it was definitely satire. His most famous, and I'd say most devastating, attack on the status quo was a short little book that had an absolutely enormous impact. In Praise of Folly. The absolute genius of this book is its concept. See, Erasmus doesn't just write about foolishness. No, he personifies it. He creates the character of Folly herself and just lets her give this long, rambling, and hilarious speech praising, herself. It was such a brilliant literary trick that let him say things that no one else would dare to say out loud. So who does Folly take aim at in her speech? Oh, just about everyone. Through her voice, Erasmus mercilessly mocks the corrupt clergy who cared more about money than God, the puffed-up scholars who were obsessed with pointless debates, and the vanity that was driving both kings and commoners. He used humor not just to entertain, but to expose the deep-seated absurdities running through every single level of society. And let's be clear, this wasn't just a funny book. It was a dangerous one. By holding up a mirror to the church's flaws, In Praise of Folly became a massive bestseller. It fueled public anger and helped create the kind of intellectual climate where the revolutionary ideas of the Protestant Reformation could really take hold and ignite. But here's the thing about Erasmus. He wasn't just interested in tearing things down, not at all. He was also a passionate builder. He wanted to offer a positive vision for how people could live better, more meaningful Christian lives. And this just perfectly shows his constructive side. He basically provided a moral blueprint for every level of society. For the individual, his handbook was a guide for an internal, personal faith, shifting the focus away from just empty rituals to your inner conviction. For rulers, the education of a Christian prince was totally radical. It argued a king's right to rule came from serving his people, not just from power. And for everyone else, his paraphrases of the New Testament were a game changer, making the scriptures accessible so that regular people could engage directly with texts that had been locked away by the clergy for centuries. Now, this commitment to reason and to individual responsibility, it would eventually lead Erasmus into the biggest intellectual battle of his life, a really high-stakes showdown at the very heart of the Reformation. This debate wasn't with some minor player. No way. It was a direct confrontation with the other giant of the age, Martin Luther. And while both men wanted to reform the church, they had a fundamental disagreement on one of the most profound questions of faith, the nature of human free will. Okay, so the split really came down to this. Erasmus, the humanist, argued in his book that while God's grace is absolutely essential, humans have a role to play. We have free will to choose good and respond to that grace. But Luther's response was absolute. He shot back that the human will is so corrupted by sin that it is totally incapable of choosing God. For Luther, salvation was an act of God and God alone, with zero human cooperation. This was the unbridgeable gap between the humanist reformer and the Protestant firebrand. So even though he never actually broke with the Catholic Church, Erasmus's intellectual courage and his dedication to reason left this indelible mark on the world, one that, you could argue, continues to influence us today. His legacy is just so powerful. I mean, Erasmus championed a faith that was grounded in reason and personal conviction. He insisted on going back to the original source texts, on the power of critical thinking, and on education as the ultimate tool for making things better. But above all, he argued for a Christianity of the heart, not just one of empty ceremony. And that leaves us with a final thought, right? Erasmus tried to walk a middle path in an age of radical division. He believed in reform from within, not violent revolution. He put his trust in education, reason, and a critical spirit to bring about a better world. So the question for us is, in our own polarized time, is that path still possible?